Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. We're going to be spending a lot of time over the next couple of hours hearing from some outstanding guests. Gary Bauer, of course, who served with Ronald Reagan and his administration. And we've posted one of the pieces from his American Values called Investigations Galore, including an FBI investigation right now of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. A little bit later, we're going to be talking with our good friend Robert Knight and his piece that appeared in the Washington Times, Seeing is Believing. And we'll be talking about, again, some things having to do with Brett Kavanaugh, but just the broader issue of what is happening in our culture as well. And then to top it off in the last hour, Representative Louie Gohmert. And we've posted even a video where he was on with Lou Dobbs expressing his theme. And so this is all part of what we call our Truth Team Week, and in particular focusing on the fact that in the midst of some of the darkness we're talking about, we want you to be a beacon of truth. And to help me all the way through the week, we have, of course, Brad Fisk, and a lot to talk about today.
There is a lot to talk about, and we're excited to see what God is going to do here today, because we have 5 days of Truth Team, and this is an opportunity for you to interact with us in a financial manner in helping us pay for the program. This is a nonprofit 501c3, not rolling in dough, but God has blessed us financially for 47 plus years, Kerby, and I don't think he's going to stop now. He's used our listeners and will continue to do so. The number you need to write down and to pray and obey, see what God would have you give, is 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151.
One of the things we like to talk about so often, Brad, is that because we focus on faith, family, and freedom, we don't just always go where the mainstream media goes, or even sometimes where conservative talk goes. Right now, it's Kavanaugh, Brett Kavanaugh, wall to wall. That's very important. But for example, when we talk with Gary Bauer, we're going to talk about some very significant changes that have been brought about even this week by the Trump administration. And you're not going to hear about it in the mainstream press because they don't want to give him any credit.
That's right.
And you're not going to hear about it very much in the conservative talks shows as well, because oftentimes they're just chasing the latest headlines. And so we're going to be talking about that. And in this idea of this beacon of truth, sometimes there are a lot of things happening in the darkness that don't really get covered, and they're not covered by the secular press. Sometimes they're not even covered that well by the Christian press, but we really try to talk about things that are going to affect your faith, your family, and freedom. And so that is one of the other reasons why we would encourage you to support Point of View. You might say, well, I listen to other talk shows. Yeah, and that I would have to say that some of them may look at issues from a left-right perspective. We try to look at them from a biblical perspective, number one. But number two, lots of times they are just chasing the headlines, and sometimes I think some of the most significant of things that will affect your family, affect their religious liberty, affect their public education, affect what's going on in your particular sphere of influence, don't get covered. And we try to cover those here on Point of View.
We do indeed. I've got another motivation for you to give, and to give right now.
Okay.
We have some friends in the ministry that have made available $1,000 as match money that we can use.
Very good.
For this hour. And so we're asking you to consider giving. You already were. Maybe I just pushed you over the line a little bit there. And again, you can give us a call. You don't have to have the money in hand right now that you're pledging. This is something that you're going to be fulfilling over the next year. Here's the phone number, 800-347-5151. There's no waiting right now, 800 800-347-5151, and you can always give at pointofview.net.
And if you go to pointofview.net, you'll see a banner. It says, Be a Beacon of Truth. It also talks about the fact that if you give at a certain level, we always like to send you a gift. And one of those is we encourage some people to think about maybe they could come up with $1 a day. That's $30 a month,
That's a great level.
$360 a year.
Yep.
And you'll receive the Bible stick. And we'll have Brad hold that up in just a minute when we're on camera here. And that is, again, as Brad will explain, something that you can put in your pocket, your purse, and you can bring a audio Bible with you anywhere you go.
That's right. It's the MP3 player. It's preloaded with the New Testament. It's the New English version, and it's got music, sound effects. It's dramatized, so it's really easy to listen to. And maybe this isn't for you. Well, how about that serviceman or woman in the military, or how about that college student who really needs to be getting God's word into their heart?
Yeah, so again, that's one of the benefits. Now, at the next level, we suggest some people could give $50 a month, and I understand that. It's what we call the Light Bearers Club, and that's where you can receive some of these booklets. I'll hold it this way and then hold it that way and the other way. This was on making your vote count. We'll be talking about that later with Gary Bauer.
Yep.
And each month you receive one on Sharia law, public education, privacy and surveillance, the Patriot Preachers, capitalism, socialism. One we're making available this month is actually one by our friend Lee Strobel,
Yep.
the Case for Christ Answer Book.
Now,
And
you can get through these in about 10 minutes typically, and I think that's really important. Everybody's rushing around. I love these booklets. I think they're great because single topic, can read it under 10 minutes, and it's going to give you information you are going to get nowhere else.
Yeah.
I sense a theme coming here.
I think so. That is certainly a theme. So, again, there's just some of those old booklets. And so, again, you'd receive the Bible stick. You'll also, of course, receive this little booklet and some of the other issues. And then just one more I'll mention real quickly, that if you would be open to giving at $100 a month, we'll give you all of those, plus we also would add to that the American Patriots Bible.
Yes.
And that one relates a lot to some of the things that's in this particular one, the Patriot Preachers. I put this together because every 4th of July I talk about that. Matter of fact, I dress up as George Washington, sometimes on the show, but always in my Sunday school class, and tell the stories about some of these Patriot Preachers. So, again, lots of great resources. But let me just say right now, most of you listening either are in the Dallas area, and you know that we oftentimes talk about some of these local issues. For example, right now, a big battle taking place between Senator Ted Cruz and Representative Robert Francis O'Rourke, or Beto O'Rourke. And so you get a chance to hear about that. Some of you listening in Minnesota, you know that we've been looking at what's happened with Representative Keith Ellison, who is a Muslim, who's in Congress, who's now running for the Attorney General, and some of the allegations of abuse. So if you find yourself saying, I'd like to know not only national news, but local, that's why you need to call that number right now. It's 800-347-5151. If you say, look, I could give you $360 a year, well, that $360 becomes $720.
That's right. Remember, every dollar doubled up to $1,000. That's important.
And so, again, we're going to take a break, and in just a minute, we're going to be talking with our friend Gary Bauer. But there are two ways you can actually give. We mentioned that number. We have some people standing by the phones right now, and I know that as we go to a break, this would be a perfect time for you to call. So, again, the pledge line number is 800-347-5151. You don't really even have to have all the money right now. We're looking for your pledge.
That's right.
But I think a lot of you say, look, I could give you $100 right now. Okay, well, that 100 becomes 200. Maybe you say, well, I could probably come up with $50 a month. Well, in a sense, you're giving us $100 a month. And so we have that match on the table. So let me encourage you to take advantage of that, especially now as we go to the break, because I know once we get Gary Bauer on, everybody's going to be glued to their radios or some of them listening online. By the way, again, as you are online, you can, of course, also go to pointofview.net. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, of course, we've also told you that we, in addition, broadcast on Facebook Live. So I'll check every once in a while, see if you've made a comment there. And, of course, we also will, every once in a while, encourage you to give us a call. But, Brad, what's that number one more time?
It is 800-347-5151. This is a double your money line, okay? 800-347-5151. Rush to the phones right now, won't you, please?
We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Every time a major hurricane hits the American coastline, we are sure to hear more claims that the devastation is due to global warming. Reporters and politicians argue that the Earth's changing climate is fueling these supercharged storms and destroying our coastal areas. Fortunately, Dr. Roy Spencer is providing some perspective to the hyperbole and fear-mongering that surface with each tropical storm or hurricane. If you look at two graphs he has put together, you can see how hurricane damage has increased, even though storm intensity has slightly decreased. Let me take the second point first. He shows that hurricane intensity since the 1930s and 1940s has decreased. The correlation line trends slightly downward, even though we've had some significantly intense storms from time to time. And it's worth mentioning that until 2017, the United States went 11 years without a major hurricane strike. But you may be thinking that is fine, but what about the devastating hurricanes like Katrina, Sandy, and Harvey? When measured in terms of billions of dollars of damage, those were obviously severe, but also significant outliers. The cost was huge for two reasons: increased population and an increase in the amount of valuable and vulnerable infrastructure in coastal areas. When Hurricane Florence hit North Carolina, few in the media reminded us that the last major hurricane to hit North Carolina was Hurricane Fran in 1996. That was 22 years ago. None of this is meant to minimize the devastating impact that hurricanes can have on coastal areas. We need to do all we can to protect people before a hurricane hits and immediately provide assistance to victims after a hurricane passes. But let's stop blaming climate change for these hurricanes. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores. Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Hi, I'm Chuck Bentley, CEO of Crown Financial Ministries. I so appreciate the work of Kerby Anderson and the Point of View team. Every day they make a stand for what is right, true, noble, and good. They capably defend freedom and uphold the biblical principles that advance God's truth related to the issues and challenges we face today. Your program and services have helped me, they've helped Crown, and so many others. We all benefit from your ministry. Keep up the great work, Kerby.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Talking about providing a beacon of truth in the midst of darkness, and we have a match on the table, which means right now your gift of $100 becomes $200. $500 would become $1,000,
Yeah.
and that we do have that much of a match still
Yes,
on the table.
we do.
And so Brad Fisk with us, and now we have an opportunity to talk to our good friend, Gary Bauer, who is, of course, the head of American Values, but you might remember him as an individual that served first as Undersecretary of Education, and then later as the Chief Domestic Policy Advisor. Of course, he also was the president of the Family Research Council, and, of course, Senior Vice President Focus on the Family, Brad,
Yes.
where you used to be, and also, of course, the chairman of the Campaign for Working Families. So, Gary Bauer, always a delight to have you on the program.
Well, it's great to be with you, Kerby, and you, Brad. And particularly on such a quiet, sort of low-key time here in Washington, D.C. I have plenty of time for radio.
Yeah, we were going to do the home and garden show because we had nothing to talk about, right? I might just mention that we've posted your piece from yesterday where you talk about NAFTA, and I've even talked about, Gary, that lots of times on Point of View we talk about issues that never really get covered by the mainstream media. And, of course, everybody's talking wall-to-wall right now, Brett Kavanaugh, and, of course, you know the mainstream media is not going to give any credit to Donald Trump, but even some of the talk shows, conservative talk shows, aren't talking about this, so we will in just a minute. But let's start out with the obvious. There's a theme, Gary, that I think is going to run through this entire program from you at the beginning to Louie Gohmert all the way to the end, and that is there's a lot of angry people, and when you look at how we have treated Brett Kavanaugh and his wife and his daughters, I think there's a reason to be upset about what has happened to them as a family. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's no question about that. The other day when he very dramatically and sort of out of character, one of the things in the hearings has been the fact that he was low-key even when some fairly nasty things were being said about him. But I think after weeks and weeks of being slimed and the threats they've gotten at home and so forth, Judge Kavanaugh came into that hearing room, and he was an angry father and dad and husband, and you could tell his emotion. But as I was watching that scene and then seeing some still pictures later, it really hit me how strained he looked and how his wife, who was sitting behind him, and his mother were both fighting back tears.
Yes.
The looks on their faces, and I compared it to the look on their faces, a few months back at the White House when the president announced the nomination. And what came to mind to me is that this family has been essentially psychologically waterboarded.
Wow.
They have been slimed. They've been their character's been undermined. Every day they get up and it's another charge. None of it proven. None of it with evidence. A lifetime of work and achievement is being erased in front of our eyes, and this should not be happening in a country like the United States. Policy differences are one thing, but for a man to have to open a newspaper and hear completely unfounded allegations that began with this one story of something that may have happened in high school and very quickly escalated to the charge that he was part of a group of boys that engaged in gang rape after they drugged young women. I mean, it's not only outrageous, it's so bizarre. I can't believe that news outlets are even giving these things any credibility by running the charges over and over and over again.
We have people saying, what can we do? And first of all, we should pray for them. And we sent out a prayer alert. And Gary Bauer's sweet wife also sends out a prayer alert. And so we've put out some of those for you listeners to respond to. But I think something else is, if I sounds a little self-serving, it's just support Point of View, support some alternatives to that. And again, don't forget, we mentioned we have a match on the table, 800-347-5151. But I thought I'd lighten it up for just a minute, Gary. And that is, this is in the category of there's a snowstorm in Hades, or this is a once-in-a-century storm, because around the particular office here, we said, we noticed, and this is hard to believe, that Gary Bauer had something really positive to say about Senator Lindsey Graham. Gary Bauer said something positive about Senator Lindsey Graham. Why is that? Talk about that.
Well, first of all, Kerby, you're absolutely right about Point of View. The liberal media, the left-wing media, it's always been a problem. A lot of the regular media now is just operating as a division of the progressive movement. And it's like the other side, the extreme left, has literally thousands of investigators and hit artists and so forth. So something like Point of View is an oasis in what is increasingly a media desert. So I hope that folks will step up. Yes, I have been. I worked with Lindsey Graham over the years on some things. I wouldn't call him a friend, but we certainly know each other well. We're almost always at loggerheads. And he's been fairly soft about things, particularly when Senator McCain was still alive. They were very close to each other. But the other day at the Judicial Committee hearings, Lindsey Graham, Senator Graham, gave an impassioned, unscripted 5 to 8 minutes defense of Judge Kavanaugh and attack on what the progressives, the leftists on that committee, had done to him and his family, which I think will, if we have anything to do with who writes the history, I think will go down as one of the most historic moments in the United States Senate. It was incredible. And I actually thought that it turned around the day and probably would lead to Kavanaugh's confirmation. But then I had not fully counted on just how bad Senator Flake was capable of flaking out, as he does many times.
You know, Gary, you are illustrating for us and for our audience in a perfect way why we should have our friends pick up the phone and call and support this ministry. I'm telling you guys, you know, the old adage, if you don't miss it, once it's gone away, then all of a sudden you miss it a lot. But you never miss it when you have it, but you're not supporting it when you have it. We don't want to let that happen here. We call this the Beacon of Truth Week, the Truth Team Week, and we're asking you, my friends, to give. 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151, and every dollar you give up to $1,000 will be doubled. So 100% return on your money, guaranteed ROI. Can't beat this deal anywhere. 800-347-5151.
I might also say that one of the other things we always do is try to highlight different ministries. And one of those, of course, you can go today, and we have the end-of-day report that is there. You can go to ouramericanvalues.com and find it, but we also have it there. And when we come back, we're going to talk about another campaign promise that was delivered by Donald Trump. Now, you've heard before, Brad, that sometimes campaign promises are like crusts on a pie. They're intended to be broken. And even yesterday, Michael Ferris was with us for a brief time. He said, you know, I really wasn't sure we were going to get the kind of judicial nominees we got. And I think there were a lot of people saying, yeah, he's making all these promises, but here's one more that was fulfilled that we'll talk about after the break. And again, I dare say that maybe you heard a little bit about it in the mainstream press, but probably very little. And that's why we, number one, want to highlight other ministries and other organizations like American Values and Gary Bauer. We also want to highlight some news stories that aren't really covered by anyone else. And so as we go to a break, this would be a great time for you to give us a call. I know when we have somebody like Gary Bauer on, you just don't want to miss it. So we have a fairly significant break, so you can actually call real quickly, chat with one of those individuals, and make your pledge.
I am really confused in a way that people aren't calling the phone and just filling up our phone lines. Are you guys not ticked off yet enough? Are you guys just, are we all sitting back and just letting what happens happen? We can't do that. We have to step in and be a part of the battle. We cannot step aside, because I got a bunch of grandkids that would be really mad at their grandpa if he didn't step up to do something. 800-347-5151. Come on, you guys. 800-347-5151.
Give us a call or get, again, the opportunity to join us at pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
April 18th, 1775. The long-feared approach of danger was now real. The British were moving, and Paul Revere mounted his horse for a ride that would go down in history in the battle for American liberty. 2 beacons were placed in the steeple of the Old North Church, alerting the people in Charlestown the Redcoats were coming by sea. 2 beacons shining in the night, signaling our forefathers to make their stand. Today's threats to our freedom are perhaps less visible than an army on the move, but they are no less real. Where are today's beacons, today's defenders of liberty? One is Point of View Radio. The other is you. Together, Let us stand for all of our freedoms to preserve what our founders won. Be the fire in our beacon today by joining the Point of View Truth Team. Join the fight this week at pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team, or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Second day of our Truth Team, and again, we encourage you to be a beacon of truth, and we want to be a beacon of truth. We want to equip you, empower you, and really encourage you to pay attention to these issues. Of course, we have midterm elections coming up. Brad Fisk with us in studio all through the week, and we have Gary Bauer with us for a few more minutes with American Values. And Gary, I thought we just for a minute might talk about one of those stories that you and I think are important. I suspect many of our listeners think are important, but hardly ever gets any kind of coverage, and that is we used to have what was called the NAFTA agreement, the North American Free Trade Agreement. That agreement, in a sense, is no more. And again, let's give credit where credit is due, since the mainstream media doesn't seem to do so. President Donald Trump has actually delivered on a campaign promise that the campaigner and attempted nominee of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, promised that he would do. And so that is something we really should talk about for a few minutes.
Well, you're absolutely right, Kerby. You know, and this was something where, quite frankly, the candidate Trump was not in line with sort of Republican establishment orthodoxy. The business wing of the Republican Party has often felt that these big multinational trade deals were a good thing, and they have been for some companies. But when we look at what happened to the American manufacturing base in the last 30, 35 years, what we see in community after community is that manufacturing base was gutted. American workers were forced to compete with workers in other countries who were making wages that no American family could live on. And I think you can make a really great case that the gutting out of that manufacturing base and the loss of all those blue-collar jobs has contributed mightily to some of the social problems we're seeing in the American heartland. So Donald Trump has been against those multinational fake free trade deals that put America at a disadvantage. In fact, all the way back into the 60s, you can find interviews with Donald Trump where he was lashing out at those deals. He campaigned specifically on wanting to reform the NAFTA deal, which he thought was to our disadvantage. He was roundly attacked for that, and then he got into office and shockingly actually tried to do what he promised he was going to do in the campaign. It's looked a little rocky in recent months. He was at loggerheads with both Mexico and Canada, and yet as of yesterday, we have a new deal with Mexico and a new deal with Canada. They're not perfect, but they are much improved. They will save American jobs. And I think we're going to see the negotiating style he uses, which is making it clear that he's looking out for American workers first. I think we're going to see that style over and over again and some other big trade negotiations in the months and years ahead.
When again, you've seen that in some of his speeches, whether it's in front of the United Nations or all these rallies he's held. But one more comment just about this, and again, keeping his promise. You and I, before he was elected, said, well, you know, he's a lot better than the alternative, but I don't know. We hope that he would actually put these kind of originalist or strict constructionists on the court. And that's what he's done. And I think it is fair to say that even though you worked in Ronald Reagan's administration, and I both have fondness for him, in some respects, I think these nominees are even more conservative, even more constitutionalist than even some of the people that were put on during the 1980s. What are your thoughts?
You know, you're really putting me in a tight spot here, Kerby, but I mean, I cut my teeth on Ronald Reagan's political career. I was listening to him at the age of 17 in my living room when he was doing a nationally televised speech that led me to turn to my dad and say, Dad, that guy's going to be president someday, and I'm going to work for him in the White House. But you're absolutely right. Ronald Reagan was a wonderful man, a wonderful president, but there were two wings in the Reagan presidency. The Meese wing and the Baker wing, and sometimes one wing prevailed, sometimes the other one did. A couple of those nominations ended up not being the best nominations. I've noticed over the last 17, 18 months that there's only one wing in the Trump administration. It's called the Trump wing. And you either go along with what the president wants, or you're not long for running around the White House. And he made it absolutely clear by releasing a list of the judges he wanted to appoint early on, and really boxing himself in that these would be among the people that he would end up putting on the court. And he's done that not only with this second Supreme Court nomination, but with another 100-plus judges he's been able to get on other federal courts around the country.
Incredible. We encourage you to do what you can to support this ministry. And as we have said before, we have a pledge line, 800-347-5151. But, Brad, we also have something else, and that is we have a match on the table.
$1,000 dollar-for-dollar match, meaning every dollar you give will be doubled up to $1,000. And if you give monthly, like $300 a day, it becomes $2 a day. So even the monthly gifts, we count the entire year.
And again, let's for just a minute hear from some of our listeners who actually have supported this ministry.
Point of View. Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Oh, I thank God for what you're doing on Point of View. You guys have more influence across this country than I believe any of them in terms of tackling the issues and getting the truth out to Americans. It's getting to the point where truth just is bottled up on every hand. Every time you turn around, there's another big bottleneck against truth. I hope your listeners realize what Point of View is doing and supports Point of View in every possible way you can.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
I always wanted to give because I thought that Point of View really brings a lot of things in out here in the open that you don't hear anywhere else. And I knew when I was hearing on there, well, I could count on it being something that you could check into it, and the proof would be there. You know, I didn't have to wonder, well, where did they make that stuff up from? I just know that it's going to be facts. That's what I call true journalism and putting the stuff out. I really think that's great.
Point of View. Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
You know, that one individual said, I probably have some people say, well, where'd they make that up,
I love it.
One of the things
That's
we
so
do,
true.
and you'll notice this today, we've posted Gary Bauer's piece from, of course, last end-of-day report from Our American Values. We've got some other pieces from the Washington Times. We even got an interview that Lou Dobbs did with Louie Gohmert. So when people say, well, where did you find that? We provide that. But Gary Bauer, sometimes when I do watch the mainstream press, I do think they make some of it up. What are your thoughts?
Look, there's no question about it. It gets too complicated to go into all the details, but I can tell you that just in this last couple of weeks with Judge Kavanaugh, there have been multiple stories that have just been outright lies or distortions and using the cheapest possible tactics to slime this guy, to ruin a lifetime's work. And look, as a Christian, Kerby, I'm supposed to be slow to anger, but I must admit that lately I've been praying more than usual to help me get through that requirement.
I'm with you, brother.
And one of the things yesterday, we had Colonel Alan West. He just lives down the road from us, so he came in the studio here and he says, I want some people to give to, he used a different word, but to tick off George Soros and some of the others, Tom Steyer and, all these other individuals. And there were some people that called in and simply said, yeah, I want to tick off George Soros. Of course, they had a different word, but I won't use that.
Well, we need to. There was a reason he said that, is because if somebody wants to start a new liberal talk show, they just go to George Soros and he writes them a check and it's all done. And that really does go on. We're up against a financial giant. And so, Gary, what can we do about that?
Well, look, there's no way we will ever outspend the left because there's a bunch of people like Soros, but we don't have to outspend them. We've just got to raise enough funds for things like Point of View and some of these other efforts because we have a huge advantage, which is that we're advocating for truth. It doesn't cost nearly as much to promote truth as it does to convince people of lies, which is what the left has to do.
Yep.
So I think sometimes our folks get discouraged. How can we ever match a billionaire like Soros? Well, look, if everybody that can give $5 gives $5, or $20 gives $20, or $50, or $100, Or if you've been really blessed financially and you can give $1,000 or $2,000, if everybody that believes in family, faith, and freedom does that, then, Kerby, you're not going to have to do these fundraisers very often. I'll sleep a lot better at night, and I think we'll win a lot more battles than we're winning now.
We're going to take a break, but this is a great time to call. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. We need 3 calls right now.
3 people.
800-347-5151.
Every dollar doubled.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Sometimes the substantial burden on a person's religious exercise comes literally to the steps of the Supreme Court. The U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia recently dismissed a lawsuit alleging that preventing anti-war activists from demonstrating outside the Supreme Court violated the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The activists noted in their complaint that as a post-denominational Christian and unity Christian, their religious beliefs compel protest against war. They insist on living out their spirituality through prayer vigils and peace walks, sometimes on the Supreme Court's steps. Interestingly, the court never questioned the sincerity of their beliefs, no matter how odd they may seem. Nevertheless, the court determined that RFRA did not protect their religious acts of protest. Why? Because the rule restricts, quote, only one of a multitude of means by which plaintiffs could engage in their religiously motivated activity, unquote. According to their own words, the steps of the Supreme Court are not the only place in which to exercise their beliefs. It's just one of the places they exercise their beliefs. So, while the rules might burden their religious exercise, it's not a substantial burden since there are many avenues left open to their religious exercise. RFRA provides broad protection to those who seek to exercise their religion, even when they attempt to do so in public. This case reminds us that RFRA correctly balances that right against the legitimate needs of government to govern. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Learn more and request a free In God We Trust window cling at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org and get your free In God We Trust window cling.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Hello, Point of View listener. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Point of View Radio is so important to the Christian community in our country. Kerby Anderson's been a personal friend of mine for a long time. He's one of the best, very best in Christian broadcasting. And Marlon Maddox, the founder of Point of View, was a great friend of my dad's, Don Wildman. So our ties go way back. But Point of View is still aired here on American Family Radio, and we're proud to bring it to our listeners. Kerby and the team do a great job of giving a biblical worldview analysis of current events and issues that are in the news that we need to know about so we can be informed, engaged, and make a difference in our culture. So God bless Kerby Anderson and the whole team at Point of View.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
In Truth Team, and again, this is the second day of Truth Team, but this is an opportunity for you right now to respond. 800-347-5151. And we have Gary Bauer with us for just a few more minutes and Brad Fisk in studio. But I'm holding up right now, those of you that watch online, a couple of these booklets. If you actually join at the $50 a month level, Brad, as you well know, we've been doing this for years. So we have some on Sharia law, capitalism and socialism, the Second Amendment, privacy, public education. This one here, Make Your Vote Count. In just a minute, I want to talk with our good friend Gary Bauer about the importance of the midterm elections. And this gives you some great material to even maybe encourage some that have been sitting on the sidelines, or you wonder how to educate yourself, because very quickly we're going to put up all the links to all the various voter guides out there and all those material. But this other one that I just created is called Patriot Preachers. You know, there was a time when pastors before an election would actually give an election sermon.
That's right.
And they didn't tell them how to vote, but they gave them biblical principles to use when they went out and voted. So I wanted to talk about this for just a minute. But first of all, if you join at the $50 a month level, of course, you'll receive the Bible stick, you'll receive our Outlook magazine, but you'll receive one of these booklets every single month.
That's great. I've read them all. They're
and
great.
I know you have. I know your wife has.
Yes.
And all sorts of other individuals. And Gary Bauer, that brings me to these midterm elections. I know so often we say these are the most important elections in history, but these are pretty important because let's think about that. If the Republicans lose control of the Senate, Brett Kavanaugh is gone, and all these other quality nominees are pretty much gone. And if we don't keep Republicans in the House, then you might end up with even less productivity out of the Congress, which is hard to imagine right now. Yeah. You have gridlock like you've never seen before. So don't you think these midterm elections are really important?
Well, they're incredibly important, Kerby. And, you know, one of the things that people were so worried about going into the 2016 election is all the assaults on our constitutional liberty. We saw the Second Amendment hanging on by one vote on the Supreme Court.
Yes.
The First Amendment's protection of the free exercise of religion was being drawn into question. I met with a Supreme Court justice who privately told me he could not count 5 votes on the Supreme Court to safeguard religious liberty. So here we are in the middle of this big Kavanaugh battle, and nobody knows how that's going to turn out this week. In addition to that, there are all these other vacancies, and the judges are confirmed by the United States Senate. Right now, there's a one-vote Republican majority. That could easily switch the other way. There's over 300 other appointees by President Trump that the Congress refuses. The Senate liberals refuse to confirm. They just keep using delaying tactics. So if our side that believe in small government, lower taxes, the sanctity of life, the Second Amendment, religious liberty, if we don't show up in mass in a few weeks in these off-year elections, we're going to wake up the next morning and find that the House and Senate both are now in the hands of the left, and I think that will end any chance of getting the judges we want. But in its own way, even more importantly, I think they will immediately move to try to impeach the president. And look, they'll go after Mike Pence, too. I mean, the other side, if it gets the power, will not be stopped by anything, particularly with all of the bureaucracy in Washington on their side and the media on their side. So there is nothing that you can do on Election Day that is more important than voting. It only takes a little while. You know, put it into your schedule. Look at what the candidates in your area believe in. Go to Point of View to get information on some of those issues and candidates. And if we do that, then I think we've got a good chance of having another 2 years here of good things happening on the economy, on the sanctity of life, on the Second Amendment, on religious liberty, all the things that your listeners care about.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that, Gary, a little bit and say, you know, the same could be said about Point of View and the preservation of this program and the growth of this program and the funding, fully funded program. And you, my friend, can make a difference right now in that by giving us a call at 800-347-5151. That's 800 800-347-5151. Every dollar you give will be doubled up to the top of the hour, but you got to call. You got to step in and say, count me in. I'm part of the team. Truth is important. Let's get truth happening. Real truth, biblical truth, truth with a capital T. 800-347-5151.
One more thing, Gary, you are, of course, the chairman of the Campaign for Working Families, and that is a PAC that's really dedicated to electing conservative candidates. So give us your estimation. I mean, do we have some people in the, if you will, the farm team, since we've had a number of Republicans step down, that we will be excited about and that you maybe are even trying to support right now?
Well, definitely. I mean, there's a number of Senate races in states that Donald Trump carried fairly handily when he ran for president. And so we could, if people show up and vote, win a lot of those Senate races. Congressman Kramer is running in North Dakota. He would be a good conservative. There's candidates in Indiana and in West Virginia and Tennessee, in Missouri, where incumbent liberal Democrat senators are being challenged by conservative, pro-life Republican Senate candidates. So there's a lot of races out there that could make a difference. But there's also, people I think lose sight of this. We've got a whole bunch, particularly in the House, of Christian conservatives that hold regular prayer sessions and Bible studies, and many of them are in jeopardy in states all over the country, including in Texas and many other states. And then there's some good guys like Ted Cruz, who has his hands full with a very well-funded challenger who's being funded with money from outside of the state of Texas.
Well, and that, again, illustrates why we need to show up. So, again, here's your marching orders. First of all, be praying for, of course, Judge Kavanaugh and his family. Be praying about this election. Number two, certainly you need to vote, and we will have lots of very important information about the election on the website, Point of View, by next week. And then finally to give. And we're looking right now for at least, three? I guess we're looking for five people right now to give. And the pledge line is 800-347-5151.
That's 800-347-5151. Every dollar doubled, including the monthly gifts. A great time to give before this offer expires, which is going to be quite soon. 800-347-5151.
Again, you can find out more about Gary Bauer. You can also give on our website, pointofview.net. Just click on the Beacon of Truth banner. And Gary Bauer, thank you for staying just a little bit longer. We just value you so much. Matter of fact, I think we'll maybe play a few of your comments later in the week. So thank you so much.
Great to be with both of you. And please, folks, support Point of View.
Going to take a break. And when we come back, we have a lot more to cover. That coming up right after these important messages. 800-347-5151.
It's called normalcy bias, and studies estimate around 70% of people suffer from it even after disaster strikes. Normalcy bias says even though things might look bad, somehow everything will continue as it always has. But in times of great threat, that assumption can be deadly. If freedom is to be preserved, people like you and I have to work just as hard as those who are trying to restrict religious freedom, those who reject the godly wisdom that brought us liberty. Point of View has been a beacon of truth for more than 45 years, but we dare not assume that will always be the case. Be the fire in our beacon today. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Take a few moments right now and visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Be among those who see the threat and take action. Be a beacon of truth. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have.
You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be spending some time in just a minute with Robert Knight. He's written a piece called Seeing is Believing, appeared in the Washington Times. Really had some things to say about the Kavanaugh hearing and where we go from here. Mitch McConnell's also said that there's going to be a vote this week, so we'll see if indeed that takes place. And in the next hour, Representative Louie Gohmert. Matter of fact, we've even posted a piece in which he did an interview with Lou Dobbs, so you can watch that video. And again, this is the second day of our Truth Team Week, Beacon of Truth. Brad Fisk with us this week, and we certainly do encourage your response, and we'll talk about how you can do so. And this is a theme that's sort of running through this day, in which I think American people, I know those of us around the table, are angry, kind of fed up with all the things that have been taking place. And if that hasn't already occurred to you, by the time you hear some of the things Robert Knight's going to share with you, I know you're going to be saying, we got to do something about this.
We do. You know, it just feels to me, Kerby, like they're sticking it to us. The liberal left is just broken all of the rules of civility. That's all gone out the window, and they just say that we can say whatever we want, whether it be truth or not, and it doesn't matter to anybody. Well, it matters to me.
Yes.
And it matters to you.
Yes.
And it matters to really the majority of people that live in the all the country between the coasts. All those people, it's important to all of us, especially those that love the Lord. Now, I'm not losing hope, and I'm not forgetting that God is sovereign and he's in control of everything. I'm remembering that. But you know what? It's so important for us to stand for truth with a capital T. And when we see falsehood and lies, call it out. Call it for what it is, which is sin, and call it out and say, stop it. Stop telling lies, and let's get to the truth, and stop just trampling over all these people. And I think it's time for us to really rise up and say, let's be counted. And we can give a very practical way for you to do that by giving us a call. This is the week we call Truth Team Week. We do this twice a year, and we invite you to be part of the Point of View financial team. And we ask you to give, and give like there is no tomorrow for us, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow in the area of politics. Here's the number, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. We need to be funded like we never have before. We are going to stand for truth no matter what comes our way, no matter what obstacles are thrown in our way. But let's not let money, Kerby, be the obstacle that gets in our way. 800-347-5151. And you can also give at pointofview.net. Looking for 3 callers right now at the top of the program.
We do need to hear from you, but let me just also give you a little bit of a preview. Robert Knight with us, and one of the key verses that runs through his piece that we've posted comes from Proverbs 18:17, and people might remember that. The first one who pleads his case may seem right until his neighbor comes and examines him.
Wow.
And, of course, he's talking about the fact that, when you heard from Dr. Ford, well, that seemed possible, and then you heard from Judge Kavanaugh, and you go, wait a minute. And again, he's going to bring a lot more to the table. And that's one of the things, Brad, we talk about so often, whether it's in the political realm or whether it's in the area of apologetics, because we not only talk about how to articulate a biblical worldview, but how to defend it. Sometimes you'll hear an argument and go, that raises some doubts in my mind about my particular political position, or doubts about, maybe the Bible wasn't true about that. And we give you the answers and the truth.
Yes, we do.
And really give you a chance to
Every
hear
day.
from people that have spent, in some cases, a lifetime researching these areas to give you those answers. So if you value what we provide here on Point of View, we really do need to hear from you. It's the second day of our Truth Team Week. We recognize we are surrounded by a lot of darkness, and we need to be a beacon of truth. So give us a call at 800-347-5151. I look through the window here and see that there are some people waiting for the phones to ring, and it won't take long. And you know, as soon as we get into some of these interviews today, you won't want to miss that. So this is a good time right now to give us a call, and to it's going to only take a couple of minutes. You don't have to have all the money right now. It's a pledge.
That's right.
And so some of you might want to join at as little as $1 a day. But you could give a lot more. But $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year, you become one of those individuals that is part of that $1 a day function, and you reach at that level. We send you a gift, and it's the Bible stick.
That's right. This is by far and away our most popular premium we've ever given away. I mean, there's nothing even close to second. This Bible stick fits in the palm of your hands. It's the English Standard Version translation, which is very easy to listen to. Remember, you're actually getting the MP3 player. This isn't something you load in your computer, what you can, but this is something that you can listen to on the device that you get, called the Bible Stick. And it's music, sound effects, and drama. It's all dramatized. Very easy to listen to. Now, maybe you're saying, I really don't need it, but boy, I know somebody who sure does, and who would love to have the Word of God in their ears. And again, it's $1 a day or more. That's all it takes to get this as a free gift, a thank you gift. 800-347-5151. Toll free, 800-347-5151. You can always give on pointofview.net.
Might also mention that at a higher level, $50 a month, we not only send you the Bible stick, which is enough, and of course you always get the Outlook magazine, but we also make available these little booklets. This is my most recent one here on the Patriot Preachers. Of course, we are in the midst of an election cycle, making your vote count, and each one of these comes to your mailbox every month. And so we have so many of those. Matter of fact, we've got more than a dozen right there on all sorts of different topics. That's a way, again, of saying thank you, and where we can educate you so that you can be a beacon of truth. And as we've talked about this over the years, just a great opportunity for us to minister to you, to equip you, to empower you, encourage you to go out and make a difference. So again, give us a call, 800-347-5151. And as I mentioned, Robert Knight's going to be with us in just a minute. We've posted his piece today on WashingtonTimes.com, or you, of course, can find it if you actually subscribe to the Washington Times. And that's another reason we do this, Brad, is because at a time when seems like the press sometimes just making these stories up.
Oh, seems like it? Yeah.
We have people call in and say, well, why should I trust what you have to say? I said, because I post the articles on the website, and in many cases, we give you footnotes. Matter of fact, there are, even in these little booklets, which you can read in 10 minutes, there are additional resources.
That's right.
So we try to document and footnote even the things we put in the small packets that we put in your hands.
The dollars you give to Point of View do make the radio program happen. That is true. But there's so much more surrounding the radio program that we provide. It's a constant flow of current information that we need to be able to make decisions that are so important. There's a lot of stuff coming up that's really important. There's confirmation hearings. There's midterm elections. There is so much happening that could affect where this country is going to go in the future. And you can have a part in that by joining our financial team at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. 4 people are available right now to take your call. Don't have to have the money now, and you're not going to get a busy signal.
I really encourage you to call now, because as soon as we get Robert Knight on, everybody's going to be glued to their phones or their computers or their radios or wherever you're listening to us. So take the time right now to make that call. I think we still have 4 open lines. So, again, if you would like to join us, please do so right now, 800-347-5151. You can find some of the material we're talking about at pointofview.net, and including, if you click on that banner that says Beacon of Truth, you can give there as well.
That's right.
Need to hear from you right now. I think we're down to 3. Again, pledge line, 800-347-5151. We'll come back with Robert Knight and give you an update on your gifts and your total right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Every time a major hurricane hits the American coastline, we are sure to hear more claims that the devastation is due to global warming. Reporters and politicians argue that the Earth's changing climate is fueling these supercharged storms and destroying our coastal areas. Fortunately, Dr. Roy Spencer is providing some perspective to the hyperbole and fear-mongering that surface with each tropical storm or hurricane. If you look at two graphs he has put together, you can see how hurricane damage has increased, even though storm intensity has slightly decreased. Let me take the second point first. He shows that hurricane intensity since the 1930s and 1940s has decreased. The correlation line trends slightly downward, even though we've had some significantly intense storms from time to time. And it's worth mentioning that until 2017, the United States went 11 years without a major hurricane strike. But you may be thinking that is fine, but what about the devastating hurricanes like Katrina, Sandy, and Harvey? When measured in terms of billions of dollars of damage, those were obviously severe but also significant outliers. The cost was huge for two reasons: increased population and an increase in the amount of valuable and vulnerable infrastructure in coastal areas. When Hurricane Florence hit North Carolina, few in the media reminded us that the last major hurricane to hit North Carolina was Hurricane Fran in 1996. That was 22 years ago. None of this is meant to minimize the devastating impact that hurricanes can have on coastal areas. We need to do all we can to protect people before a hurricane hits and immediately provide assistance to victims after a hurricane passes. But let's stop blaming climate change for these hurricanes. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores. Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Hey, this is John Stonestreet, the host of Breakpoint and the president of the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. As a champion of Christians thinking clearly about what's happening in the culture from a Christian worldview, there are a few people that I look to for more clarity and confidence and providing clear answers to the big questions that our culture is asking. And Kerby Anderson, I love what happens on Point of View each and every day. And anytime I get the opportunity to be a guest on the program, I always think that Kerby is the best interviewer in the business. I encourage you to support Point of View with your prayers and with your financial support.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Good friend John Stonestreet. Thank you so much, John, for some of your comments. And we have in studio with us Brad Fisk. Just a minute, we're going to get to Robert Knight. But, Brad, we have something.
Well, let me just throw a number out to you. $5,000. Okay, now do I got everybody's attention? $5,000. That is a match challenge on the table now.
There you go.
That means every dollar you give, whether it be a monthly gift or a single gift, will be doubled up to $5,000. Those monthly gifts become so important because we count the entire year. So if you give $1 a day, it's actually $360 that gets doubled to $720. How do you like that math? Okay, 800-347-5151. Thanks to donors who made this match possible. But here's the deal, Kerby. Got to have it done by the top of the hour.
Oh, boy.
We got less than an hour to go from right now. 800-347-5151. 5151. Will you stand with us? Will you help us stay strong going into perhaps one of the most important times in our country's history that could be unprecedented with what happens? And you can be on the right side of truth with a capital T by giving us a call. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. 5151, every dollar doubled.
You know, you said unprecedented. I am old enough to remember the Clarence Thomas hearings, and those were unprecedented.
Yes.
Of course, they've been preceded by something else unprecedented, by the borking of Judge Robert Bork. Now, we talk about borking people, but I didn't think you could get any lower than where we were with Judge Robert Bork or where we were with Clarence Thomas. But last week we were, and I use air quotes, treated to the worst I think I've ever seen.
Me too.
And
Absolutely.
that's why we wanted to bring our good friend Robert Knight on here. He's a regular weekly columnist for the Washington Times. You can find him in townhall.com and a variety of other places. I always appreciate him because he cut his teeth as an editor and a writer for the Los Angeles Times before he worked with a lot of different ministries over the years that he has done so. And he is the author of 7 books and co-author of 2 others, including his latest one, A Strong Constitution. What would America look like if we followed the law? What a concept.
I love that. That's a great title of the book.
Anyway,
Well done.
Robert Knight, we've posted your piece here, Seeing is Believing. And you've been in the Washington, D.C. area for a long time. You've been a commentator for a long time. Have you seen anything like that circus that took place even last week?
No, Kerby, in a word. And my wife and I watched all nearly 9 hours of it last week, and we're appalled. And we're just watching in disbelief as the Democrats, one after another, I thought, made fools of themselves and went after Brett Kavanaugh in a way that okay, let me just say, I've never seen anything quite this bad. I mean, I saw the Bork thing, and I saw the Clarence Thomas hearings, but this was something new. And, you know, it's still going on.
Yes.
Even though they've agreed to the FBI investigation. You know, the Democrats have brought up 3 more demands. First, they say the FBI probe isn't enough now. It's too limited, and they really should go on indefinitely, kind of like the Mueller probe, which is now deep into President Trump's sock drawer, and they're looking for a purchase of a movie ticket to see Dr. Zhivago back in '65, I think. And finally, they want the American Bar Association to reopen its vetting of Mr. Kavanaugh, to whom they gave the highest rating. So they're trying 3 different gambits, and for all we know, they're going to dig up a 4th accuser before Friday. I mean, that seems to be the game plan.
Let's come to your article for just a minute. I did quote earlier, but it's worth coming back again to Proverbs 18, verse 17, because we look at issues from a biblical point of view, and that is a passage which I think a lot of people need to maybe write out, put on an index card on the refrigerator, because the first individual coming forward seems right until the next person, or in this case, the neighbor, comes and examines him. And you know as well as I do that some of the commentators, even on some of the, quote, conservative, and I put that with, again, quotes, some of the conservative talk shows, after hearing from Dr. Ford, said, well, I guess what we're going to have to say is Judge Kavanaugh is toast. But then he came in and gave, I think, an incredible performance, and it illustrated perhaps more than any other way that I could illustrate in modern times the truthfulness of that particular scripture verse, don't you think?
Absolutely, and that's why I used it near the top of the column. It's don't be too quick to judge. Hear 2 sides of every story. I was taught that as a journalist. Never just go with one source. But you know, I didn't get around to the third tactic the Democrats are now deploying, and that's Senator Dianne Feinstein. She's actually tweeted that Judge Kavanaugh lacks judicial temperament
because he
didn't just sit there.
Yeah.
He didn't just sit there like a bump in a log while they tore him to shreds. He actually showed anger, as an innocent man would if his reputation was being torn apart.
Shouldn't we show anger?
So,
that's kind of the theme that's running through today. What's your thoughts?
Absolutely. Jesus showed anger at his father's temple being desecrated by the merchants who were cheating people in the temple. He turned over tables. He fashioned a whip to drive them out. There is a place for anger. And of course, we're warned in Proverbs and elsewhere to be slow to anger, and that we don't take revenge. That's God's job. But it doesn't mean that we're not to be angry under any circumstances. In fact, if we don't show any anger at all, it would be evidence of guilt, I would think, because who but a innocent man would be that angry at being falsely accused? I think Brett Kavanaugh came across perfectly believable.
He did. And, my friend, people can give right now to Point of View and help us continue the fight on a whole different level, because I can't go places that Kerby can go, and I can't learn things that he can learn unless he brings them to me. And my friend, you can join our financial team at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. Put some shoes on the feet that are angry, and let's get walking right to the telephone right now. Make it happen, because we have a responsibility to stand for truth with a capital T, biblical truth with a capital T. And these guys have crossed the line. As far as I'm concerned, they've crossed the line. Civility has gone away, and it's time for us to stand up and take it back. And you can do that by joining the team right here at Point of View. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Every line should be filled up right now with your gift.
I want to talk about something real quickly, Robert, too, because you've researched this about the, if you will, the financial mismatch. When I mention names like Tom Steyer or a variety of other individuals that have invested heavily in these progressive movements, if we don't do something to get behind Christian organizations, conservative groups, and things like that, we're getting outmatched, aren't we, right now, in terms of some of those individuals that are billionaires giving to some of these campaigns and some of these movements to actually tar and slime people like Brett Kavanaugh?
Oh, absolutely. There's a guy named Stephen Phillips who married into a very rich family, and he's become a leader of the Democracy Alliance, which is a hard-left group that's funding all sorts of attacks on conservatives and Christians. As members, they have Norman Lear, the left-wing Hollywood director, George Soros, the left-wing worldwide financier, a number of others, and they're bankrolling campaigns in the political realm, but they're also attacking Christians' credibility in the public square. And that's why Point of View is so important. We're not going to get a fair shake from the media. I can tell you that, having come out of a media background, that the people in the newsroom have changed over the years. They went from being merely liberal to being hardcore left-wing activists. They're not interested in getting both sides anymore. I used to work with honest liberals who, while they had very strong opinions, would try to get both sides. That's no longer the case. Unfortunately, I live in the Washington area, and I have to read the Washington Post every day for what I do. And they had a front-page article today attacking white men out of the blue.
I want to get back to that in just a minute. We have one of those mandatory breaks. I want to hear some more of that comment. Okay. But when we go to a break, this is a good time to make a phone call, isn't it?
It is. Every dollar doubled up to $5,000 at 800-347-5151. Time to call right now.
April 18th, 1775. The long-feared approach of danger was now real. The British were moving, and Paul Revere mounted his horse for a ride that would go down in history in the battle for American liberty. 2 beacons were placed in the steeple of the Old North Church, alerting the people in Charlestown the Redcoats were coming by sea. 2 beacons shining in the night, signaling our forefathers to make their stand. Today's threats to our freedom are perhaps less visible than an army on the move, but they are no less real. Where are today's beacons, today's defenders of liberty? One is Point of View Radio. The other is you. Together, let us stand for all of our freedoms to preserve what our founders won. Be the fire in our beacon today by joining the Point of View Truth Team. Join the fight this week at pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team, or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we do need to hear from you. Let me just mention real quickly that, of course, we have a match on the table, $5,000 match. That's dollar for dollar. That means if you want to join, for example, at the Truth Team level, the basic level, that's $1 a day, $360 a year. $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year. That becomes $720.
And Candy did that from New Mexico.
There you go.
Right there.
And we got still about $4,000 left on the table, so we did work off some of it, but we have quite a lot to go. We have, at the moment, because we brought some more people in, 6 Open lines.
Oh, wow. Opportunity with a capital O right there. Somebody joined at $50 a month. Another person gave a single gift of $400. That becomes $800. That's the way the match works. 800-347-5151. It's 800-347-5151. We're just asking you to step up and stand behind us. Get our back, would you? We need someone to watch our back. And that's you and you and you. 800-347-5151.
Robert Knight with us, and I might just encourage you to read the piece that we have posted here called Seeing is Believing. And let's talk about a victory, because we've talked about all the losers. I mean, I think really Brett Kavanaugh and his family were losers. I think Dr. Ford was losers. I think the Democrats were losers. But in the midst of this column that reminds us of so many people that were, you said in perhaps his finest moment, Senator Lindsey Graham exposed the whole charade as a cynical sham to delay the Senate vote. Now, Robert Knight, I've known you long enough to know that you're not known for saying a lot of really positive things for Senator Lindsey Graham. On many cases, you've been very concerned about some of his votes, but he stands out in your column as somebody that deserves a little bit more of a mention, don't you think?
I think the term is strange new respect.
Great line.
Yeah.
And I use that in the best sense. He did a marvelous job. In fact, during the hearing, they took him out during a break. He went out in the hallway and he was interviewed by several media people. And that's when he really unloaded. Before unloading during the committee hearing that resumed, and he said that this was a disgrace. He used very colorful language. He laid out exactly what they were trying to do. He talked about the threat of it, discouraging other people, good people, from ever aspiring to high office.
Good point.
And that is one of the biggest fallouts here that is not mentioned. All the people say, gee, I was thinking of going into public service, but if this is how they treat people who disagree with the left, I think I'll stay home. I mean, that's exactly what the left wants.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a show trial, and what's on trial is not just Judge Kavanaugh, but all good-hearted Americans who want to serve their country. They're telling them to stay home, and I hope they don't do that in November, because if the left regains power in this country, we're in big trouble.
You know, let's talk about that for just a minute, because whether you look at, let's take Jack Phillips, a baker in Colorado, and trying to make an example of him, or whether you take Judge Kavanaugh and try to make an example out of him, or whether you take a photographer in New Mexico, a florist in Washington, or whatever it might be, there is oftentimes an attempt to just take out somebody, and like you said, it becomes a show trial, and what you end up doing is winning not just that particular battle, but a whole kind of PR war, right?
Yes, and the left has two strategies they use all the time, and one is to isolate, polarize, identify an enemy, and then pour all sorts of wrath on them because that scares people, and it keeps them on the sidelines. And the other is they create martyrs for their cause. You know, they find a police shooting or something, and then they just ignore all the details, raise it up as something that is typical. The Michael Brown shooting in Missouri was the biggest example of that, you know, where the white police officer shot Michael Brown, who had just held up a convenience store, and he was attacking the officer trying to get his gun, so the officer shot him. To this day, if you pick up the Washington Post, they'll just say, yes, a white officer in Missouri shot unarmed teenager Michael Brown. No details given. Obviously a racial incident with a white officer against a black citizen. This is why the whole charge of fake news that President Trump raised resonates with the public. They know they're only being told half the story, if they can even get that half. The reporting is so bad these days.
Well, and again, one of the things we are encouraging people to do is to be a beacon of truth. You know, when we put this together, we did not know that the Kavanaugh hearings were going to be as bad. We didn't think they were going to be great, but we honestly, in our naivete probably, Robert, thought that today we'd be talking to you about, well, how was the first day for Justice Kavanaugh on the bench, you know, and that didn't happen.
Right.
And so we are in the midst of a lot of darkness right now. And so the theme for this week is the beacon of truth, that we need to shine a light. And if people want to get the truth, sadly, even though you have worked at places like the Los Angeles Times and other places that are part of the media, you know that they've got to come to places like Point of View to really get the truth, because it's just not going to get it other places.
Yeah, and you do have a number of alternatives, but Point of View stands out because you guys do your homework. I've always appreciated about you, Kerby. Whenever I come on to do an interview, I know you're going to be steeped in the topic, you're going to ask good questions, and you're going to present information that I'm probably unaware of, and I learn also whenever I'm on your program. So I know my relatives up in New England were listening to Point of View every day. Last time I heard, and they loved the show. So I haven't talked to them lately, but I'm hoping they're listening right now, actually.
I hope so, too.
Well, the phone number, Robert, if people want to call and get in on this, is 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. In your estimation, you just kind of answered the question, but I'm going to ask it a different way, Robert. Why should people pick up the phone, have their money doubled? It's a great time to give right now. The phones are quiet. And what's going on with the audience? What's going on with the electric? What's going on with people in this country who seem in some ways to be sitting back and saying, oh, my gosh, what a mess?
I think it's all too big for them. I think that's the problem. People think, oh, my gosh, what can I do, little me, when the nation is being racked by this divisiveness, all these crises. I think what they have to realize is that it doesn't take a majority. It just takes a committed minority. And you just get a few people doing the right thing, and that's catching. Other people see it, and then they do the right thing. And so I think people have to step up. They have to support ministries like Point of View. They have to get registered to vote and help others get registered to vote of like mind. Because if they don't support people who are telling the truth and support candidates who are telling the truth and have biblical values, then that's giving up. That's letting the dark side win. And when I say dark side, I mean people who really hate God and biblical principles and want to replace America with a secular socialist state that's governed from the top down instead of from the grassroots up.
You know, one of the things that we do as a resource that we give to those of you that join at especially the $50 a month level is called the Light Bearers Club. And here is the booklet that I put together many, many months ago on making your vote count. And here is one, for example, on capitalism and socialism, which we were just talking about and Robert mentioned in passing. But I wanted, Robert, for you to speak to that issue, because one of the other ones I'm holding up is on homosexuality. And you talked about how a small committed group can make a very significant difference. The number of people that identify as having same-sex attraction is in the 2 to 3% rate, probably at best. And yet look at what the homosexual agenda has been able to accomplish when they are a minority compared to the number of just even the listeners to Point of View. So a committed group can make a big difference, can't they?
Absolutely, especially when you have the committed group standing with a giant bully behind it with a big club, and that's the media. They just will not allow the truth about this issue to get out there. They will not allow stories about people who have overcome homosexuality, the people we call ex-gay, to tell their stories. They keep hammering the falsehood that people are born gay, can't change, and so therefore it's just like skin color or anything else. There's no evidence to that effect. I've crunched the studies that they brought out years ago, and they found out that they're not only deeply flawed, but they're never replicated.
Let me come back. I want to get into that. We have one of those breaks. I want to come back to that because you have really done the research on this, and I really want to talk about that and the transgender issue. But since we got a break coming up, let's just talk about the fact that people can respond right now.
Here's an update on the match. It was a $5,000 match toward the top of the hour. We got about 1,000 of that taken care of. What that means is in the next 17 minutes, we have to have another $4,000 come through the door.
Yes.
And all of that match money will then be put in our total. Here's the phone number, 800 800-347-5151. Come on, let's fill the lines. 800-347-5151. Every dollar is doubled right now.
Then call, because when we come back, we're going to be talking with Robert Knight. Again, 800-347-5151.
Let's go.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Sometimes the substantial burden on a person's religious exercise comes literally to the steps of the Supreme Court. The U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia recently dismissed a lawsuit alleging that preventing anti-war activists from demonstrating outside the Supreme Court violated the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The activists noted in their complaint that as a post-denominational Christian and unity Christian, their religious beliefs compel protest against war. They insist on living out their spirituality through prayer vigils and peace walks, sometimes on the Supreme Court's steps. Interestingly, the court never questioned the sincerity of their beliefs, no matter how odd they may seem. Nevertheless, the court determined that RFRA did not protect their religious acts of protest. Why? Because the rule restricts, quote, only one of a multitude of means by which plaintiffs could engage in their religiously motivated activity, unquote. According to their own words, the steps of the Supreme Court are not the only place in which to exercise their beliefs. It's just one of the places they exercise their beliefs. So, while the rules might burden their religious exercise, it's not a substantial burden, since there are many avenues left open to their religious exercise. RFRA provides broad protection to those who seek to exercise their religion, even when they attempt to do so in public. This case reminds us that RFRA correctly balances that right against the legitimate needs of government to govern. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Learn more and request a free In God We Trust window cling at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org and get your free In God We Trust window cling.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth. Michael Youssef.
I tell you, I always look forward to being with you, Kerby. You truly give me a good intellectual challenge. In any way that you are gifted, or God called you to do, as long as you are involved in some way, and that is the plea I have with your listeners, Kerby, that please do not just listen to a program like this and then go, well, that was an interesting thing. No, I want to challenge you. Get involved. Find out what Kerby Anderson is doing. Find out what other ministries are doing. Get involved, because it is only when the believers really take their faith seriously that can we turn the world upside down. I believe that with all my heart.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Again, we do need to hear from you right now. That number is 800-347-5151. Just a minute, we're going to be talking with Robert Knight once again. And a matter of fact, I might just say that if you ever want to find some of the material, type in Robert Knight, homosexual myths. You will see an enormous amount that he's written on this, and we're going to talk about some of those in just a minute. But Brad, give us an update on where we stand.
Well, we started with a $5,000 match earlier in the hour, and we're very grateful that it's now been whittled down to $3,640 to go to be fully funded. Here's what it means. means. If we don't get that $3,640 in by the top of the hour, then that amount of money, whatever it is, does not go in to our total.
Whoa.
The only way to get that money in the total is for it to be matched dollar for dollar. And I guess I'll just ask, where is your line? Where is your line to be ticked off enough at what's going on and allowing the left to lie, and to lie openly and often? It seems to be their modus operandi. Whereas we on this side, I'll rest in the Lord. I'm not excited. I'm not worried at all, because my God is in control. He is sovereign over all things. But there's the practical side of us being fully funded to continue to bring you biblical truth from a world perspective. That's what we do, Kerby, and we want to continue doing it. And you can help us by calling right now and pick up a portion. If 10 people came in at $1 a day, that would be taken care of right there. 10 of you at $1 a day. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. We say so many times, we need you to call. Well, the truth of the matter is not that. There's other listeners who haven't even listened to a Point of View program yet because they're 10 years old. They need Point of View by the time they turn 18 or 20 or in college. And we need to be there for the long term. And that only happens when you step up and give. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151.
Robert Knight, one of the good illustrations that we can give about how there is just so much misrepresentation is in this area of homosexuality and the transgender movement. And you were getting into that, and we just wanted to have you stay over just to talk about that for just a minute, because you've done an enormous amount of research. And when I followed the research that you've done, I've realized that so often the data and the studies that show up in the mainstream media are influenced by political ideology and by politics, not by good scientific research. Give us some examples.
Well, the biggest example, or the biggest point to make, is that science isn't convincing until it's been replicated. You have to do several studies that come up with the same result, and usually by independent researchers, so it isn't the same people perhaps making the same mistakes over and over. And in all these studies that purport to show a genetic cause for homosexuality, they've never been replicated, not a single one. And of all the studies, they have gaping holes in them, and some are just absurd. The first big one was in 1991, the Simon LeVay study, in which he studied cadavers, supposedly of straight men versus homosexual men. The problem was, just start with the sample of the 19 homosexual subjects. All had complications with AIDS, so that could have changed their brain formation. But this is the one that got me. Of the 16 supposedly straight men, something like 6 of them had died of AIDS, and they were in the Bay Area. Think about that for a minute. Yeah. They probably weren't straight, okay? Yeah. There weren't straight men dropping dead of AIDS in the Bay Area. It was a problem in the gay community. So, and the guy later admitted, the scientist, that we didn't really check we couldn't. There was no way to check their orientation. We just assumed they were that way. And then even the measurements in the brain varied greatly. So the whole thing was a sham. And yet, to this day, you'll see
I'll still quote that.
This study cited.
I'm going to speak on it next week, and I've even pointed out that when you assume your conclusions, if you did that in a 6th grade science project, you'd get an F.
That's
and
right.
This was in Science magazine. I mean, this is just illustrative of so many. And the transgender stuff right now, I mean, you even got Dr. Paul McHugh, who I know you know, who was at Johns Hopkins, an eminent psychiatrist who used to think that actually doing surgery and hormonal work and all of that would be good for these kids, and now come out and changed his mind and said, no, we're doing more harm. This is abuse. Well, then immediately we can't listen to him anymore. And so there's just a good example, and you have so many, and people can go to your website, which we have a link to as well, and read that and recognize, once again, Brad, what we've been talking about. Right. if you don't go and do the research, or if you don't come to Point of View, or we'll give you both sides if there is another side, but most of the time it is just making stuff up in ways that is just not even appropriate to the scientific method.
That's right. And just a reminder, we're counting the minutes down now. We're down to very few minutes left to get this match challenge taken care of. I don't know about you guys, but if there was $3,600 sitting on the table and it was mine if I picked it up and walked out the door, but it wasn't going to be mine if I left it on the table. That's what we're doing. We're leaving $3,600 on the table, and we simply don't want to do that. Won't you please give us a call? Every dollar doubled up to $5,000. And that phone number is 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. I'm looking for line number 1, line number 2, line number 3, 4, and 5. All 6 lines going at the same time right now. 800-347-5151. $3,640 to go, and we will have met the match.
I might just mention, too, Robert, just before we let you go, that although we've posted your article, Seeing is Believing, we also have a link to all your other articles, The Roots of Hyperpolarization, The Struggle for Supremacy, kicking off more contempt for America, and on and on. So if people say, "Oh, I really like what he's doing, and I like to read more," we've got all of that information on our website, pointofview.net. So thank you for being willing to stay a little bit longer. We value your input and look forward to the next opportunity.
Well, I always enjoy being on Point of View, and I'm honored to be on with you guys. Thanks much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, just before we run out of time in this hour, we have a match on the table. I see a number of individuals on the phone, but we have, 2 open lines?
2 open lines right now. 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. And you can also give at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
I might just mention, next hour we have Representative Louie Gohmert. So you want to call right now because you don't want to miss a minute of Louie Gohmert.
Yes.
Matter of fact, we won't get him on until about quarter after, just so we can kind of catch our breath and give you an update on how we're doing. But again, Louie Gohmert, we've also posted a piece of where he was on with Lou Dobbs, who's been on the program with us as well. So that's on the website. And again, we are looking right now for you to fill the phone lines, and you just about done it, but I still think we have an open line.
We do.
2.
We have about 2 open lines, and so you can just call straight in and get a hold of somebody. 800-347-5151. We go to the top of the hour, so you got 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes to the top, and that's when this expires. So let's get the entire $3,600 in there and call the match done. 800-347-5151.
Okay, Robert Knight, in the next hour we're going to have Louie Gohmert, but we need to hear from you right now. So this is the perfect time to call. 800-347-5151. Visit the website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
It's called normalcy bias, and studies estimate around 70% of people suffer from it even after disaster strikes. Normalcy bias says even though things might look bad, somehow everything will continue as it always has. But in times of great threat, that assumption can be deadly. If freedom is to be preserved, people like you and I have to work just as hard as those who are trying to restrict religious freedom, those who reject the godly wisdom that brought us liberty. Point of View has been a beacon of truth for more than 45 years, but we dare not assume that will always be the case. Be the fire in our beacon today. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Take a few moments right now and visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Be among those who see the threat and take action. Be a beacon of truth. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, and it is our second day of our Truth Team Week, and it is Beacon of Truth. And as I mentioned last hour, if you just happen to be joining us, let me mention that we'll have Representative Louie Gohmert with us in just a minute. But we also had a match on the table, $5,000. And so I have sitting across from me Brad Fisk, and I wanted to know where we were on that. And then in just a few minutes, so stay with us, I wanted to get into another example, one that is in my commentary today, about how the mainstream press is not covering climate change and hurricanes, because you had a couple of hurricanes recently. And I want to talk about that in just a minute.
Interesting.
But give us an update.
Okay, really quick. We have about $2,400 left in the match to reach the full $5,000. So that means every dollar you give is doubled up to $2,400. You give monthly at $1 a day. That $360 for the year becomes $720, because we get to match the entire year of any monthly gift. So that is a sweet deal. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Become a Truth Team member and follow the beacon of truth. Allow us to continue to be that beacon in your life and the life of the church.
Again, we need to hear from you, so if you can give us a call, 800-347-5151. Louie Gohmert will be with us in just a minute. Of course, we'll be talking about the Brett Kavanaugh hearings and where we go next. But I thought just for a minute, we've been talking today about how sometimes you don't get the full perspective. And so we like to talk about this here on Point of View. And I thought, Brad, before we get Louie Gohmert on, because then I'll just step back and let him preach, and I'll pass the offering plate, because Louie takes over. And I thought it would be good just to mention that when you support Point of View, you're not just supporting the radio broadcast, though you are, but you're also supporting the Outlook magazine that we send out. You're supporting all the videos. But another thing is I do a daily video commentary and audio commentary. Right now, it's mostly just audio because we've been so busy with some of the others. But in the past, you can actually see me on camera doing some of these. But the audio commentary, which we make available to those of you that would like to read it, shows up in your inbox. But the one today has to do with the hurricanes and climate. And you hear time and time again. Haven't you heard this? You know, we're having these hurricanes. These are devastating hurricanes, that the climate change has supercharged these storms and has destroyed our coastal areas. Well, that's why I thought we'd go back to an individual we've interviewed on this program. What a surprise. We've interviewed the best and the brightest, and his name is Dr. Roy Spencer.
Okay.
Now, in this particular case, what he shows in these graphs is, yes, the damage to hurricanes has increased, but the intensity of the storms has decreased. You might say, well, wait a minute. Okay, let's take each one step by step. Yeah, let's take this down. First of all, if you look, and I'll hold this up for people to see one of the graphs, but you can find them on our line here as well, that if you plot out since the 1930s the intensity of the storms, you recognize that if anything, the intensity is going slightly down. If anything, it's about even. But if you really follow a typical correlation line, and believe me, I have taken multiple classes in statistics, so I can verify that that is the case, that storm intensity has actually gone down. But the damage to hurricanes has gone up dramatically. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have more people living at the coast. We also have more expensive equipment there at the coast. And so you can look at Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy. And yes, okay, that is indeed the case. But in the case of Harvey, it had more to do with floods. But there is no evidence at all that climate change is making these superstorms, because in some cases, these are just outliers. But if you look at the general trend, you can look at it yourself. That's why we post the graphs.
Because
you can actually see the damages are going up because of who's living on the coast. But the storm intensity is actually slightly decreasing, which is not what you would predict if indeed you believe that climate change was having the impact on
And I don't
hurricanes.
think I would have heard about this anywhere else but here. Nobody's talking about it the way you are, or the way you just did. Do you know that?
Yeah, and so again, that's really an important issue that we need to address. Now, I want in just a minute to hear from some of our callers, because they can give us an opportunity to maybe encourage you to give. And in just a minute, we're going to hear from Louie Gohmert. But let's hear from one of our callers, a couple of our callers, who actually believe that you should support Point of View.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Thank you for your program. I am a team member, and you have opened my eyes to the truth.
You have a wonderful program. I just want to thank you for being there. It's great.
I just wanted to call in and express my gratitude for the awesome work that you guys have done. I've been listening for about 6 months now, and it's just been something I can hardly miss. Thank you for giving me my daily dose of truth with a biblical worldview. I'd just like to encourage anyone listening that's inspired by Point of View to give what they can. I'm a California millennial and Christian, and I now can say I support Point of View.
Thank you. First of all, let me say I listen to y'all's show every day as much as I'm able, and I really appreciate the topics and conversation that y'all bring to the fore.
I listen to y'all's show a great deal, and I really appreciate what you guys do.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Back once again, and we do need to hear from you. In just a minute, we're going to hear from Representative Louie Gohmert. So we need to get this fixed right now, don't we?
Let's get the match challenge cleared up right now. $2,400 to go at 800-347-5151. We just looked in the phone room, and all the phones are open. They're all waiting for your call, so you won't get a busy signal. It's a 2 to 3 minute call, and you do not have to have the money in hand, which you pledged today. You're simply saying, I'm going to stand with you with money that you give us in the future. And that phone number is 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. You can always give online at pointofview.net.
And again, let's just recognize we got Louie Gohmert on here in just a few minutes. First of all, I'm going to try to squeeze as much out of him as I possibly can. He's a good friend, but I mean, he's got stuff to say about the email scandals, about Fusion GPS. He's got a lot of comments about the Mueller investigation, not to mention the fact that we've posted everything he had to say about the Kavanaugh hearings and a variety of other things. So we're going to do our best to try to learn from him, as we always do. And he sometimes actually sits in this chair as a guest host for me. So we are thrilled that not only is he a member of Congress and certainly part of the Freedom Coalition, but also just a very good friend. So that's why you need to call right now. You don't want to miss him in just a minute. So please, as we go to a break right now, this is the time to call. I think we still have 5 lines open. Pledge line number is 800-347-5151. You know there's a match on the table. We don't want to leave any of that. We certainly recognize that if you want to give a gift just of $100 right now, it becomes $200, you know. And so again, 6 lines?
6 lines available. Let's fill every single line during this next break. Every line, 800.
That's what we need to do.
347-5151.
Every dollar matched right now, and so don't let that go to waste, and don't wait any longer, because you're going to want to hear from Louie Gohmert. I don't know how we're going to get it all in, because he's got so much to say. We'll just sit back and let him preach and teach and educate us. He's got some inside information, so that's why you need to give us a call right now. 800-347-5151. Also, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. Click on the banner that says Beacon of Truth. 800-347-5151.
Let's go. Go to the phones.
Be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Every time a major hurricane hits the American coastline, we are sure to hear more claims that the devastation is due to global warming. Reporters and politicians argue that the Earth's changing climate is fueling these supercharged storms and destroying our coastal areas. Fortunately, Dr. Roy Spencer is providing some perspective to the hyperbole and fear-mongering that surface with each tropical storm or hurricane. If you look at two graphs he has put together, you can see how hurricane damage has increased, even though storm intensity has slightly decreased. Let me take the second point first. He shows that hurricane intensity since the 1930s and 1940s has decreased. The correlation line trends slightly downward, even though we've had some significantly intense storms from time to time. And it's worth mentioning that until 2017, the United States went 11 years without a major hurricane strike. But you may be thinking that is fine, but what about the devastating hurricanes like Katrina, Sandy, and Harvey? When measured in terms of billions of dollars of damage, those were obviously severe, but also significant outliers. The cost was huge for two reasons: increased population and an increase in the amount of valuable and vulnerable infrastructure in coastal areas. When Hurricane Florence hit North Carolina, few in the media reminded us that the last major hurricane to hit North Carolina was Hurricane Fran in 1996. That was 22 years ago. None of this is meant to minimize the devastating impact that hurricanes can have on coastal areas. We need to do all we can to protect people before a hurricane hits and immediately provide assistance to victims after a hurricane passes. But let's stop blaming climate change for these hurricanes. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores. Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Hi, I'm Chuck Bentley, CEO of Crown Financial Ministries. I so appreciate the work of Kerby Anderson and the Point of View team. Every day they make a stand for what is right, true, noble, and good. They capably defend freedom and uphold the biblical principles that advance God's truth related to the issues and challenges we face today. Your program and services have helped me, they've helped Crown, and so many others. We all benefit from your ministry. Keep up the great work, Kerby.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Second day of our very significant Truth Team Week. And, of course, we're talking about shining a beacon of truth in the midst of our darkness. We're going to be talking with our good friend, Representative Louie Gohmert, in just a minute. But in studio with me today, Brad Fisk. And how are we doing on that match?
Well, we carved off a little. I didn't get an update yet, but I will get one really soon. But we heard from California. We heard from Texas, from Alaska, from Vermont, just to name a few. So thank you, folks, for calling in and giving your very best gift to keep Point of View on the air, strong and growing. 800-347-5151. We know the match is not cleared up yet. 800-347-5151.
Well, as I said, I'm sure we're going to do our best to try to get as much as we can out of Louie Gohmert. First of all, I know he has some things to say about the Kavanaugh hearings because we've even posted this video of where Lou Dobbs did an interview with him. But I also know that Louie Gohmert has some things to say about the Mueller investigation, maybe about Hillary's emails, about Rod Rosenstein, maybe Fusion GPS, to mention just a few. Louie Gohmert's a good friend of this ministry. As a matter of fact, he sat in this chair sometimes as a guest host on Point of View. He represents the the 1st District of Texas in his 7th term from the United States House of Representatives. Before that, served as a district judge and a number of other functions as well. Louie Gohmert, just great to have you on the program with us.
Kerby, you know, I always love hearing your melodious voice. It's just, especially with all the truth that comes out of it. So thank you.
Well, let's talk about the Kavanaugh hearings. You've been in Congress for a long time when you get down to it. I mean, first sworn in 2005, so you've seen a few things come and go. Have you seen anything like the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings before when you've been in Congress?
Not since I've been in Congress, but I did watch all of the Clarence Thomas hearings, and so I'm getting reminders of some of that. It was never about whether or not he was qualified. It was an effort to keep a qualified man off the court the same way they had done Bork. But really, of all people to have assassinated a character, Ted Kennedy probably started this with the assassination of Bork's character, a man that had lived his life upright. Yes, he was a little bit arrogant. I was not his biggest fan, but the man was eminently qualified. And what Kennedy did to him was really outrageous. But Kavanaugh, I mean, for heaven's sakes, lives an upright life. And I got tired of hearing people misuse the word credible. So many people said, oh, but Dr. Ford is so credible. Well, as a former judge who had to sit there and listen to people and judge whether or not they were being honest, you look for little things and the inconsistencies and how she said that she couldn't remember all the details, but then said the details were, plastered or etched in her mind. You just go, wait a minute, this isn't right. And Kerby, it hadn't been that many years ago, somebody would have been afraid to come through, come public and blast somebody's character when they were so unsure of so very much.
Yes.
You just wouldn't destroy a person unless you were absolutely sure. But again, this isn't about Kavanaugh's qualifications. He's eminently qualified. But what I heard, and sometimes you have to listen without the emotion in it. Yes, she seemed sincere, but I emailed Rush Limbaugh yesterday, and he mentioned what I said without mentioning me. But people were saying, no, she seemed really sincere. I mean, she was emotional, and there was a reason that they wanted a delay before she came and testified. Well, she lied. She didn't need it. It wasn't because she didn't like to fly. We found out she was a
flies
world
everywhere.
flyer.
Yeah.
And, Grassley had said, look, okay, I'll come out there. We'll come to you in California. Well, it turns out she may not even been in California because she's such a traveler. So it was not about flying. That was a lie. It was about getting her ready for the testimony. So the answer to the question, but how did she seem so sincere with all that emotion? And the answer is the same one to the question of how do you get to Carnegie Hall? And that's practice.
Yeah,
exactly. And so she was extremely well rehearsed. She had it down very well and right emotion in the right part. And that comes from, plenty of rehearsal. Sometimes it's sincere, but when you look at all the discrepancies, that's what you judge her credibility on, not whether or not there was emotion. Because I've seen lawyers that could get emotional at just the right points, and they got emotional at that same point every time they mentioned that same thing. And in fact, Racehorse Haynes basically won a criminal case once because he said, now look, I know the DA is very persuasive, and I'm telling you, when he gets at some point he's going to get wound up and he's going to stand. I think it's this spot right here, and he pointed to the floor, and he's going to raise his finger and he's say, "This is the most outrageous thing I've ever heard of." And when he does that, just keep in mind, he does that in every case. It'll sound sincere, it'll sound emotional, but he does in every case. And sure enough, the DA got up and he was standing in that spot. He put his hand in the air and he said what Racehorse said he'd say. And then he went, "Well, I know he said I was going to say this, but I really mean it in this case." So,
I love Louie. He's got so many stories.
Yeah, that's great.
Louie, I introduced you as a district judge, but
Yeah.
you were like Chief Justice of the 12th Court of Appeals and other things. And,
Right.
and if nothing else,
yeah.
Brad, I just think there's a good example. A lot of people say, why did it take so long for them to get Dr. Ford on there? Because they were practicing how she was going to testify. And you heard that here on Point of View.
Yes.
Exactly.
What a mess.
Yep.
What an awful
One
mess.
other thing I want to put on the table.
It's just so unfair. It's so unfair. And, they know that normally somebody that's been nominated to either a Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court, they're normally not going to turn around and sue somebody that is slandered or libeled them because they're just, want to move on and not have a case drug out where they're involved. But at some point, somebody has got to be held accountable for doing these kind of things.
Yes.
And, it is outrageous. And we do have some immunity for what we say in our role as members of Congress. But some of these senators come out and say things publicly bashing this man that have no basis in fact. And there could be some liability there.
Well, we'll see. We do still have a match on the table, don't we?
We do have a match on the table. There's about $2,000 left of that match. And the phone number to call, and the lines are open, is 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. And it occurs to me that we actually can respond to all of this garbage going on now in the midterm elections.
Yes, we
Wouldn't
can.
that be something if the conservatives and the Christian vote turned out in a record numbers at the midterms and completely landslides both of the houses with our people? Who are telling the truth and are living a biblical lifestyle.
I know Louie Gohmert would love a few more people to join with him in the Freedom Caucus and things like that. So,
that would be awesome.
And when we come back from the break, I want to get your comments on, for example, in the last hour we talked with Robert Knight, and in his commentary he quotes from Proverbs 18, verse 17, where it says, the first person to plead his case or his cause seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him. And when we come back from the break, I want to talk about, we already heard, of course, Dr. Ford, and I heard a lot of people saying, well, that's the end of that. I guess Brett Kavanaugh is going to step down. And instead, he came in with a lot of fire. Yeah. And so I want to get your comments about that. And then also, Louie Gohmert, I haven't heard you say that many really favorable things towards a South Carolina senator by the name of Lindsey Graham, but on the Lou Dobbs program, I heard you say some things, so I want to talk about that with you as well. But again, we have a match.
Six lines open. Let's get the $2,000 cleared up right now. 800-347-5151. Will you be one of 6 people that call right now? 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
Again, 800-347-5151. Let's get this cleared up. We'll be back with Louie Gohmert right after this.
April 18th, 1775. The long-feared approach of danger was now real. The British were moving, and Paul Revere mounted his horse for a ride that would go down in history in the battle for American liberty. 2 beacons were placed in the steeple of the Old North Church, alerting the people in Charlestown the Redcoats were coming by sea. 2 beacons shining in the night, signaling our forefathers to make their stand. Today's threats to our freedom are perhaps less visible than an army on the move, but they are no less real. Where are today's beacons, today's defenders of liberty? One is Point of View Radio. The other is you. Together, let us stand for all of our freedoms to preserve what our founders won. Be the fire in our beacon today by joining the Point of View Truth Team. Join the fight this week at pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, and we have with us Representative Louie Gohmert. We'll come back to it in just a minute, but also in studio with us, Brad Fisk. It is the second day of our truth team, trying to shine a beacon of truth, trying to shine light in the midst of darkness. And we have a match on the table. How are we doing?
We are down to the final $990 to go. I'm not making this up. That's what's remaining of the match challenge. So can I just encourage 5 of you to call and give your very best gift and see if we can whittle this thing down to 0 by the end of the break. Again, the phone number, 800-347-5151. Every dollar you give up to $990 is doubled. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Come on, you guys, let's get her cleaned up.
Again, Representative Louie Gohmert with us, but just before we go to him, let's go to a former representative, Michelle Bachmann.
I was about 19 years old when I first met my husband, and he brought me out to the farm in Wisconsin where he lived with his parents. And every day at noontime, the radio came on, and my in-laws had the radio tuned to the Christian radio station, and it was Marlon Maddox's Point of View that came on. So I was still getting my footing for my faith. And this was very important because what Point of View taught me was the intersection of current events with my faith in Jesus Christ. And I just loved the show. I loved Marlon Maddox's personality. He was cutting edge. All the new things that you'd hear about in the news, he would be talking about on the radio station, but from a biblical worldview perspective. He very profoundly shaped a lot of my thinking during that time, and we couldn't wait to listen to it. Kerby does such a fabulous job. I've enjoyed being on the show with Kerby. It's needed now more than ever because it seems like too few pastors are willing to say from the pulpit what they need to say today. That's why I think that Kerby Anderson, what he's doing on Point of View, is probably more needed now than ever because we need to be hearing this on the radio if we aren't going to be getting it from our pulpits.
Again, 2 of my favorite people, Michelle Bachmann, Louie Gohmert. Lou, you've known Michelle for a long time, but back when she was 19 years of age, was listening to Point of View, and that really made a difference in terms of her life.
Yes, and she has made a real difference in terms of the country's life. But no country lasts forever. I'm hoping that we can perpetuate it another 100, 200 years. But for the first time in American history, going back 500, 600 years, when this people were coming to North America, there has never been a time until the current time when Christians were persecuted for being Christians in America. It's happening now. Now, there were denominational fights and there was one group against another, but it wasn't persecuting someone for being a Christian, and that's exactly what has happened nowadays. And I had one dear friend say, I said, if Hillary wins, she's going to support the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights that think the biggest hate group threat may be evangelical Christians. And he said, but isn't that what we deserve? And I said, of course it's what we deserve. But we serve a God who is full of grace and mercy, and he has given us another chance to get this country back on track, honoring the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we've got that chance, but we didn't get salvation for the country. There's no such thing, but we have a chance to help get this country back on track. And, even though you have an Ivy League education, Kerby, you are so smart. And you have impacted me and the way I see things, and I will forever be grateful.
I appreciate the comments that you oftentimes make from a Christian point of view. A lot of people don't realize, Brad, but Louie Gohmert's been a deacon, a Sunday school teacher at Green Acres Baptist Church. I've said before, there aren't too many members of Congress I'd allow to teach my Sunday school class, and Louie is one of those.
And I'm not surprised of that either.
Yeah, and again, we talked just a few minutes ago about this with Gary Bauer and Robert Knight. You have Bible studies there in the Capitol. You have a lot of dedicated Christians. Now, you need in these midterm elections to elect a whole lot more of them, but there is light even in the midst of the darkness up there, isn't there?
Well, yes, there is. And with God, all things are possible. And you were mentioning the scripture a moment ago, I would encourage people, Ecclesiastes 10:2, that literally says, the heart of the wise inclines to the right, the hearts of the fools inclines to the left. So maybe there is something instructive in that wonderful verse.
It's so good.
I'm looking that up in my Bible right now. Let me see here.
That's really good.
Ecclesiastes 10:2.
Yes.
It's right there.
I know you're in an airport and you have to go in just a minute, but I thought maybe you could give us some comments about, first of all, the importance to pray for this nation. Number two, to vote. We have midterm elections coming up. And then finally, to give, because that is really kind of the theme that runs you here, to pray, to vote, and to give. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, of course, taking the last first, we know Jesus made clear, where our hearts are is basically where our pocketbook is. And, you know where the heart is by what you are giving to. And so that is critical. But God doesn't need our money, to do the miraculous things he does. But it is a sign of honor to him. It is why there is a reason to keep blessing America. So
I think we might have lost him here.
I'm here. But also, it is critical in these midterm elections because, the old saying is democracy ensures that people are governed no better than they deserve. But God's given us so much more than we ever deserve. This is our chance to get the country on track. And many of us never thought we would see the Supreme Court actually come back to actually basing cases on what the Constitution says instead of on some shadow of a penumbra. And we have that within our grasp. But people are going to have to come out and vote. They're going to have to support great truth tellers like yourselves so that people hear the truth and they understand the truth before they go vote. It's not enough to go vote. Anybody can go vote, and unfortunately some are voting that shouldn't, but it is important, it is critical that people do their homework before they go. The founders expected that before anybody voted, they would look at it as if they were hiring somebody to manage their business, which they really are. And you would do the interviews, you would do the background checks before you hired that person, because that's what voting is. It's actually hiring who is going to be your servant.
So again, we want to encourage you to join with us, 800-347-5151. And just before we let you go, again, you're going to be watching the Mueller investigation and Rod Rosenstein. And, of course, we have this investigation of Brett Kavanaugh. It's just one investigation after another. Can't we ever get to a conclusion up there in Washington, D.C.?
Not as long as Rosenstein is the Deputy Attorney General. He's got to go. And I've told the president there, he's got to go, because as long as he's there, then there are going to be outrageous investigations. It's going to be projecting people that actually committed the crimes, projecting them onto people that did not. That's got to stop. We've got to have investigations into people that are actually committing the crimes instead of those who are being investigated by people that committed the crimes.
Well, again, Louie Gohmert, I know at the airport you got to catch a flight, and I just appreciate you joining us today here on Point of View.
Well, thank you. Just great. Thank God for what Point of View has meant to this country.
I was thinking, I wish you were my congressman, sir.
Well, I'd be honored. I'd be glad to serve you anytime,
Thank you so much.
regardless of where you live.
Thank you for your support.
Okay. Louie Gohmert, and again, Ecclesiastes 10:2. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, the heart of the fool to the left. I don't know about that exegesis, but he was having fun with us. And just again, don't you love somebody with that sense of humor, but also just the fact that he's really standing for those principles from a Christian perspective. But, okay, we're coming to a break, and we just need to get this cleared up.
Right. We have a match remaining, and we need to hear from you to clean up the match. During the break, we'll go find out what that is. But in the meantime, don't hold back. Please, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. We got 4 lines open right now for you, so you won't get a busy signal. 800 888-347-5151.
When we come back from the break, first of all, we'll hear from Tim Wildman. He's got some things to say. And then maybe Jay Sekulow, since we're talking about this issue of religious liberty. So we got a lot more to cover. 1-800-347-5151 right after these messages.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Sometimes the substantial burden on a person's religious exercise comes literally to the steps of the Supreme Court. The U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia recently dismissed a lawsuit alleging that preventing anti-war activists from demonstrating outside the Supreme Court violated the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The activists noted in their complaint that as a post-denominational Christian and unity Christian, their religious beliefs compel protest against war. They insist on living out their spirituality through prayer vigils and peace walks, sometimes on the Supreme Court's steps. Interestingly, the court never questioned the sincerity of their beliefs, no matter how odd they may seem. Nevertheless, the court determined that RFRA did not protect their religious acts of protest. Why? Because the rule restricts, quote, only one of a multitude of means by which plaintiffs could engage in their religiously motivated activity, unquote. According to their own words, the steps of the Supreme Court are not the only place in which to exercise their beliefs. It's just one of the places they exercise their beliefs. So, while the rules might burden their religious exercise, it's not a substantial burden since there are many avenues left open to their religious exercise. RFRA provides broad protection to those who seek to exercise their religion, even when they attempt to do so in public. This case reminds us that RFRA correctly balances that right against the legitimate needs of government to govern. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Learn more and request a free In God We Trust window cling at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org and get your free In God We Trust window cling.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Hello, Point of View listener. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Point of View Radio is so important to the Christian community in our country. Kerby Anderson's been a personal friend of mine for a long time. He's one of the best, very best in Christian broadcasting. And Marlon Maddox, the founder of Point of View, was a great friend of my dad's, Don Wildman. So our ties go way, way back. But Point of View is still aired here on American Family Radio, and we're proud to bring it to our listeners. Kerby and the team do a great job of giving a biblical worldview analysis of current events and issues that are in the news that we need to know about so we can be informed, engaged, and make a difference in our culture. So God bless Kerby Anderson and the whole team at Point of View.
Point of View, Truth Team 360, Beacon of Truth.
Again, we just have a few more minutes before this day is over, and we've got just a little bit of an update on where we've been so far in terms of the match. How are we doing?
We got 750 $15 to go. That means just two of you checking in at the $1 a day level, it's done.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Two people checking in $1 a day, and we've got it done. Please do that before the top of the hour, because this does go away, and we don't get to put the money in the totals. I want to say thanks to a few people who helped us get there: Sharon, Lori, Tiffany, Diana, Barbara, Gilbert. Thank you. That's just a few. I just randomly wanted to say thank you to you, and thanks for standing with us. 800-347-5151. We are down to the final 11 minutes of this match. $715 to go. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151, or you can give online at pointofview.net.
You know, the theme today has been anger, and I'll show you something that really makes me angry that you probably haven't seen, because it just gets covered very little, if at all, by the mainstream press. What I've got right now, and you can see this as well, Brad, is Judge Kavanaugh's home. Now, first of all, you can see he doesn't live in a mansion. It's just a very nice little home, except you see that people have spray painted outside every one of the walls. Now, I can read one. I'm not sure I can read some of the words on the air. The FCC would be upset.
Awful.
But one says, "I should burn this house down." Now, this is the home of Judge Kavanaugh that has now been vandalized by 200 protesters. First of all, you can see that he lives in a very modest home. They've destroyed his yard by driving cars on it. They've thrown feces on the windows of his home, and every outside wall is spray painted. Now, this is a man that has had a life of integrity and has been a consummate judge in first the Circuit Court of Appeals, now the D.C. Court, and now being considered for the Supreme Court. So they're not doing this for a home of a man that's aborting babies every single day.
That's right.
They're not doing this for a man that has been somehow linked to the Holocaust or is a neo-Nazi. We're doing this for an individual being considered to the Supreme Court. I don't know what else we have to say that shouldn't make you angry or just weep and just say, what has happened to this country?
What we need to do first is pray. We need to pray for our enemies, pray for those who do wrong, pray for those who are sinners. And I'm a sinner too, okay? So are you. I mean, we all are in that boat. But to respond in this fashion is absolutely wrong. It's just flat out wrong. It's not the right thing to do, and it's not being civil. It's okay to have a disagreement. It's okay to have a debate. It's okay to disagree or have the right and the left and the conservative and the liberal. That's okay. What's not okay is to attack them and attack their property and destroy it, and to attack their family. I'm telling you, that part gets me going.
Yes, I know.
That really, talk about my wife that way. Watch out, mister. I may not be trained in whatever I need to be trained in, but I'm going to be mad. Touch my kids or my grandkids. Watch out.
Yes.
That is not.
Have to take your two kids out during your own confirmation hearings because
that's
of things
absurd.
people were saying and everything. You know, I just for a minute wanted you to hear from Jay Sekulow, because Jay Sekulow's known Brett Kavanaugh, and of course he's here talking about why you should support Point of View. But here is an individual that has gone before the Supreme Court and would love to go again in front of the Supreme Court to eventually make his case before a number of judges, including Justice Kavanaugh.
Well, first, number one on my list is the fact that Point of View has always been at the forefront of bringing current events to the Christian community. And I'm talking about going back, 20 years now. And we certainly have enjoyed our relationship with Point of View going back to the early days and have appreciated the continuing relationship. And I think as the world issues get more complex and the issues facing our country get more complex, the role of programs like Point of View become even more critical. So I personally encourage listeners to support the ministry and the work of Point of View to keep the voice on the air. It's critical in these times, and will, as I've said in other occasions, it'll be even more critical in the years ahead. So I do want to encourage people that are listening to this broadcast, have enjoyed these broadcasts, and have garnered information from these broadcasts to support Point of View with their gifts and their prayers, because it's such a critical time for our country.
Again, just a great opportunity. You know, when I see Judge Kavanaugh's house, I used to live in the Washington, D.C. area when I went to Georgetown. I'd volunteer to go and paint his house. I'd go to volunteer to clean his windows. I'd volunteer to sit out there with one of my rifles sitting in a chair so that nobody went into the yard again. Although if you do that in Washington, D.C., you get yourself in trouble because you're not even allowed to be a person who believes in the Second Amendment. But this just shows you how awful the other side has become. Now, what are we going to do about it?
$715. We'll have a $5,000 match put into our total. That's huge. And when is enough enough?
Yeah.
For you and you and you. When is enough? When do you say enough of this? And that's why I'd love to see a reaction in November, a peaceful reaction from Christians and from conservatives, and to have a landslide victory in both houses and blow the press away, the hostile press, and blow away the opposition where they said, but this must be the real thing. My goodness, what happened? And we can do that if we just show up. Just got to show up. When is enough enough? 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. The few remaining minutes we have, please go to the phones and get that $715 cleaned up.
You know, one of the things that Michael Brown has said is that Christians should maybe take a page from the songbook, if you will, of Brett Kavanaugh when he got angry and said, we need to fight. He says, not in a military sense. I don't want you to overreact here, but we need to fight with our viewpoints, our words, our certainly go to the polls and vote and things like that, and learn that, you know, sometimes we've just been too passive for too long.
That's right.
And again, one of the questions I've got right now is when I look at this spray painting on the house of Judge Kavanaugh, feces on the windows, and people that have run across his yard and ruined his yard. And to know that, I want you tonight, go and watch television, see if you even find anything about this. You may not even know that it happened.
That's right.
Because there's two kinds of censorship. One where we actually cover it and tell the false story. That's fake news. The other one, we just don't cover it at all. And that's just as bad.
I'm speaking for everybody here at Point of View when I say this. I know I am. And that is, we still understand the sovereignty of God. We still understand that God is in control. He's the God of the universe. So in our anger, it's more righteous anger, as was said earlier by one of our guests. So again, here's the phone number for you to be a part. And by the way, the phones continue after the broadcast is off the air, and you can always go to pointofview.net anytime, 24/7, and give. 800-347-5151.
Wouldn't you like to raise some money just to paint the house of Brett Kavanaugh that has been defaced? So we are out of time today. It has been the second day of our Truth Team, and even though we're going off the air, I still see that there's one or two people that could take a phone call. So please give us a call right now, 800-347-5151. Tomorrow is normally our Millennial Roundtable. We will have a millennial or two because Lauren McCaffrey is with us. She's actually part of the Green family, Hobby Lobby. So we'll do that, but we also just will bring you some really interesting things we heard today from Gary Bauer. 1-800-347-5151.
Let's go.
Coming to the end, 800-347-5151.
It's called normalcy bias, and studies estimate around 70% of people suffer from it even after disaster strikes. Normalcy bias says even though things might look bad, somehow everything will continue as it always has. But in times of great threat, that assumption can be deadly. If freedom is to be preserved, people like you and I have to work just as hard as those who are trying to restrict religious freedom, those who reject the godly wisdom that brought us liberty. Point of View has been a beacon of truth for more than 45 years, but we dare not assume that will always be the case. Be the fire in our beacon today. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Take a few moments right now and visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Be among those who see the threat and take action. Be a beacon of truth. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.